Hey there, beauties and bees. Welcome back to the show. Okay, what I'm going to do today is, I'm going to skip skincare because I am so tired. I am not just feeling it. You know those days when you don't want to do anything and just want a drink and some friends to chat with? That is today for me. So join me for a good story. You can bring your skincare drinks or whatever makes you feel cozy and warm, because where we are going today, you're going to need it. It's late winter, 1959, and we're in the Soviet Union. We follow 10 experienced trekkers. They are in the prime of their lives. In photos, they're smiling together, laughing, hugging, and messing around. Success, they think, lies in front of them. They go in search of a challenge, a top award. They are going to be the best of the best, the top-graded trekkers in the whole of the Soviet Union. 10 excited adventurers set out. Only one returns. Turning back after just a few days, a horrible flare-up of sciatica would end up saving his life because all 9 others die on that mountain, and they die horribly. Their bodies are found scattered and disfigured. What killed them? That is not clear. But this is what investigators found. Hypothermia, internal trauma, skull fractures, missing eyes and tongues. 9 young, fit, experienced people die brutally in the freezing, snowy, lonely mountains, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest settlement. So, what happened? Let's get into the story of the Dyatlov Pass. The 9 trekkers were due to arrive at the next town around February 12th. Igor, the group leader, had promised to send a message to their sports club as soon as the group made it over the pass and back to safety. By February 20th, the 9 trekkers still didn't show up. So a search party was called, and this was a serious effort. Military helicopters were sent into the mountains with teams of searchers made up of police, prison camp guards, indigenous man tribespeople, and volunteer students from the same university as the lost group. They searched high and low. It was February, so conditions were awful. With weather like this, it was unlikely that this was a rescue mission, but a recovery one. Surviving in these conditions was almost impossible. On the evening of the first night, one of the searchers raised a toast to the missing 9 people. Another said, "Best not to drink to their health." His face was heavy, but to their eternal peace. They found the tent first. It was half covered with snow, and inside were most of the possessions. Books lined the walls of the tent, and the rucksacks were neatly arranged. White pork fat, a delicacy and a good source of calories for hiking, had been sliced as if it was waiting to be cooked. One of the searchers said in an interview years later, "It was sliced up as if they were getting ready to have supper or something and didn't have time." The canvas had been slashed from the inside as though the group didn't have time to undo the fastenings, as if they wanted to leave in a hurry. Then the searchers found 8 or 9 sets of footprints leading away from the tent and down the slope. Unlike the slash tent, the footprints looked like they were made slowly, methodically, like they calmly walked into the freezing conditions, which means they weren't very deep, not like prints you would get from running. And what's more, some of them were made by bare feet. That is, there were no tread marks. And some meters down the slope, the tracks disappeared. There was no sign of the trackers immediately around the tent. There was no sign of anything living or moving at all. At last, one of the students saw something in the distance next to a large cedar tree. They thought they saw a brown shape, a lump, or what could it be? They got closer, and as they got closer, human bodies began to take shape. There were 2 bodies next to the remains of a campfire. They would turn out to be 2 of the students named Yuri, and they were wearing barely anything apart from their underwear. The bodies were frozen stiff. Their hands and feet were, to quote the student who found them, reddish-brown. Their legs, once athletic and powerful, were purple and solid with the cold. They lay so close together, probably to share body heat. Probably they didn't know they were looking at the last face they would ever see. One of them had a gash on his cheek that was crusted with a grayish substance, More of it spilled from his mouth. Inside one of their mouths was also a small piece of human flesh. It was later determined that the flesh was his own. He had bitten off his own knuckle. And next, they found Igor, the group leader and talented engineer whose sister thought he would do cosmonautics as part of the Soviet space program. That's how smart and ambitious he was. Unlike the Yuris, he was dressed but barefoot. He was lying face down, clinging to a broken-off branch. Had he tried to climb a tree? They gently turned him over. His face was peaceful, like he was sleeping. He was very, very young-looking. But in the coffin later, his mother said his hair was gray, and she only recognized him because of the gap in his teeth. His sister couldn't attend the funeral. It was too painful. Next, they found Zenaida, or Zena. She was in a position like she was turning to look at something back up the hill. At a glance, it looked like she wasn't dead at all, just distracted, on watch, in motion. But in fact, her body was frozen solid. There was a large bruise on the side of her body that looked like she was struck with a stick. Then, on March 5th, they found Rustam, a long-distance runner and a quiet, shy member of the group. He was wearing more clothes than the others, but one foot was bare. His skull was fractured. And the post-mortem concluded that other minor injuries were caused because in his last moments, he moved around in a state of agony. His watch had stopped at 8:45. These first 4 bodies told a story of hopeless terror. Some of them were found with their mouths open in silent screams, their clawed fingers frozen by their faces. Did the Ural Mountains echo with screams the night of February 1st, the night of the incident? But screaming for help would have been useless. There was nobody around to hear them. Nobody who cared to help anyway. The searchers didn't find the other 4 bodies until after the thaw in May. Deep in a ravine, the mountain, whose name apparently translates to Dead Mountain, was beginning to release its last victims. One of the strangest things about the last 4 bodies is that they were dressed in clothes belonging to the others. Ludmila was found in the twisted position on her knees, with her hands and face pushed into the rock. The corpse was mummy-like. Nikolai had a fractured skull, so badly fractured it damaged his brain substance. Alexander, a nuclear physics student, anyone should remember that, had found a wound behind his ear, and his neck was strangely twisted. Then finally, there was Seaman, the oldest of the group and a World War II veteran and sports instructor, who had multiple broken ribs and an open wound on the right side of his skull, which was deep enough to show bone. Seaman and Ludmila's chests were crushed. One doctor said the force needed for such injuries couldn't be caused by a human. It was as if they had been in a high-speed car crash. But uncannily, their torsos had no bruises, no external wounds. All the damage was under the skin. And more gruesome, Seymune and Ludima's eyes were gone, and in their place were just empty black sockets. Poor Ludma's tongue was missing too. The autopsy indicated that her heart was still beating when her tongue was removed from her mouth. So it was as if her body was telling them, "I can never say what happened to us." The only official conclusion from the autopsies was that they had been killed by a compelling natural force. In the years of silence that followed, more questions grew than answers. Yuri, the one who turned back, and the families of the victims howled for answers like the howling winds in the mountains. But the authorities were secretive and harsh. 10 people actually started off on the track. 8 men, 2 women. Most of them were in their 20s. The oldest member of the group was 38, and it's thought he died on his birthday, February 2nd. The youngest, just 20 years old. They set out on a hiking and a skiing expedition deep into the Ural Mountains in what's now Western Russia. And they were ambitious doing the track to gain a special certification from the government. These were fit people who were used to tough conditions. So now let's talk about that one hiker, Yuri Yudin, who had to turn back because of sciatic pain. When he and the group parted ways, the others told him that they might be delayed, but not to worry. They would see each other again soon. He gave one of them a sweater, and it was later found on the body of his friend. Maybe it gave just a little bit of warmth or comfort in his final moments. So Yuri went back to civilization. Disappointed, maybe, his chances for greatness in the wilderness was over. What he couldn't have realized is that his sciatica saved his life. He lived until his 70s and died an old man, left only with the memories of his friends, and more than a little suspicion. So what happened to the 9 victims of Dead Mountain, since been named the Dyatlov Pass after Igor, the group's leader? Okay, let's take a moment. There are some things we know about the circumstances leading up to the incidents. The group planned to trek for 14 days. The first 4 days were over rough, punishing terrain. It was January when they started, and the near-Siberian winter wasn't for the faint of heart. Deep snow, freezing temperature, dangerous ravines, and howling winds. No Russian had ever completed this route before, but the trekking party were all experienced skiers and already had Grade 2 trekking awards. They started the stretch from one of the most remote villages in the Soviet Union. There isn't a town for hundreds of kilometers, so if anyone else was out there with them, it would be highly unusual. When they started their ascent of the so-called Dead Mountain, the weather was extremely bad. So they veered off course. They found somewhere to shelter, dug out a platform, and pitched their tent. There was barely any firewood, and there wasn't an animal inside. So this is why the man called it Dead Mountain. Here, Igor made his final diary entry. "We're exhausted, but start setting up for the night. We have dinner in the tent. It's good and warm. Hard to imagine such comfort on a ridge with howling wind outside, hundreds of kilometers away from any human settlement." Reading Igor's last diary entry and matching it with the abandoned sliced pork fat, ready to cook, it's hard not to feel close to him. We have dinner in the tent. He says it is good and warm. These were not people out of their element. That is not the diary entry of someone with weak nerves or a fear of the outdoors. These people, they were made for this trip. So soon after Igor's totally normal entry, what could have terrified them so much that they slashed open their tent and then bizarrely walked slowly in temperatures that were probably lower than -25°C? Some of them barefoot, some of them nearly naked. Most experts say it was an avalanche or something similar. The biggest theory is that the group heard or thought they heard an avalanche and left the tent in a panic rush. So if you picture that situation in your head, you're lying in your tent surrounded by friends you trust. Then suddenly a noise, a rumble you feel all through your body, a crushing, violent weight. Screaming, people scrambling for any clothes they can grab. Then out into the driving wind and freezing cold. You shout for each other. Maybe you fall. It's like your legs aren't your own anymore. And one time, you don't get back up again. You can't. Your body is betraying you. You can't speak. You can't breathe. You try to climb to your feet, but you're so clumsy. You can barely move at all. Your body is on fire. You tear off your clothes. You're there on the mountain, but you're somewhere else now too. Far away, drowning in fire. Your thoughts slow. You start to leave yourself somewhere. There is still screaming. Maybe you make one last effort to turn back in the direction of the tent. It's there, it's still there, it's there, and your friends are dying. And then nothing. Or like the 4 people in the ravine, in the scramble for safety, you step over ground that betrays you and you plummet, falling into a ravine that you can never hope to climb out of, even if you had the energy. In pain, freezing, you throw yourself against the rock and weep. And that is where they find you. Tongueless, 2 months later, they got separated. Some died of hypothermia, some fell to their deaths. But if that's the case, why was the tent covered in a lighter amount of snow than what an avalanche would normally leave? And why were the footprints shallow, like they left the tent in an orderly fashion, not in a rush? Why were some of the bodies in the ravine found without any outward signs of impact, but also with totally crushed chests? Some of the group made it almost a mile away from the tent. Would that really be possible after being slammed by packed snow? Then there is the theory that it was weapons testing by the Soviets. It was 1959, the thick of the Cold War. Radioactive material was found on some of the clothes. And okay, Alexander, our nuclear physics students, remember? He may have had a reason for this. One of the original investigators said in an interview years later that he thought it was really strange that higher-ups asked him to test the bodies for radiation. What possible reason could there be to test for this, especially if the obvious answer was an avalanche or a compelling natural force? The investigators even queried it officially, and he didn't get an answer. No, what he got instead was a visit from a senior official who told him to rule the deaths as accidental. Remember Yuri, who turned back because of his sciatica? He supported this theory and believed until his last breath that his friends didn't die accidentally, but were killed. Added to this mystery, a Mansi woman later told a journalist that the night of the accident, she saw something strange in the sky. She said this bright, burning object appeared. It was wider at the front and narrower at the back, with a tail, and there were sparks flying off it. Another man interviewed later, he was 12 at the time, attended the funeral since he was from the area. He said there were rumors at the time that the students had wandered into a testing area. He said that at the funeral, the coffins were open, and I could see that the skin on their faces was a weird color, the color of bricks. There was nothing in the newspapers, but everyone was talking about it. We thought it must be some kind of state secret. A prosecutor from the time of the first investigation, Ivanov, said that it looked like the students had been hit by some kind of explosive wave. In 1990, when the Soviet Union was beginning to crumble, he confessed that the original autopsies were amazing in the sense that they were exceptional, and that he was told to classify any reports about balls of fire in the sky. More than this, apparently at the time of the students' deaths, dead animals and birds were found everywhere, and local villagers were told not to drink from the wells. One of the most terrifying explanations is that the thing they were running from was inside their own minds. That is the theory of infrasound. The idea goes that winds whipping over the hills created a low-frequency sound that is known to create terror in humans and animals. What this would have meant for the group is that, for reasons totally unknown to them, they were suddenly terrified and needed to escape. Maybe this is why some left in their underwear and why Igor was found clinging to a branch. So, did he try to climb a tree to escape the imagined monster chasing him? But it doesn't explain the orderly footprints either. Another theory is that it was the many people who killed them because they felt threatened by these trespassers. Many people were even interrogated and possibly even tortured by the Soviet authorities. But the many people were known to be peaceful. The bodies showed no sign of a struggle. The coroner said no human could have caused the damage. And the Moni also helped with the search. And there are just a couple more details that make this one of the most chilling wilderness stories you've ever known. One of the last known pictures captured by Nikolai's camera. It's grainy, black and white, of course. It shows trees in the ground caked with snow, and in the background, an unknown figure emerging from behind a tree, faceless, tall, with long, long arms. In a separate diary entry, one of the group writes, "We now know that Snowman Yeti exists." It's now thought that the photo is of a member of the group, though, and that the diary entry is satire. Even so, in the absence of a plausible explanation, our imagination fills the gaps. I think we need a reason why those 9 people full of life died out there. And the families also don't want to give up. They tried everything to get answers, but at the end of the day, the authorities have the final word. One family member later said they were told, "You will never know the truth, so stop asking questions." Some things we know for sure. Those 9 young people looked happy in the earlier photographs. They were truly living life on their terms. They were clever, talented, ambitious, and for that, we should celebrate them. Their dear friend Yuri never forgot them, and neither did their families. Their memories are still alive today. Even now, triers follow the same path. In the mountains, people can spend some time at the memorial, where all 9 triers are remembered. The memorial says, "In the memory of those who have gone and will never return, we have named this mountain pass in their honor, the Dyatlov Pass." And since I guess most of us won't make it to the mountains of Western Russia, how can we live to honor the memory of these 9 people? Because they were brave, and I think they deserve to be remembered as they were in life. Maybe by doing something brave ourselves, we can keep a little bit of them alive today. Or maybe we can appreciate our next warm meal or our warm bed in a new way. So, let me know in the comments what you think happened. And until next time, sweet dreams and bye-bye.